what the heck? Let's fire up the live stream on a Friday night. It's nearing midnight as we creep into Saturday, week 11. Saturday is just minutes away. And of course, the college football weekend has already kicked off with Thursday and Friday games. North Carolina State going down on Thursday. Syracuse moving to 8-2 just minutes ago. We've got a ranked matchup right now with Boise State taking on Fresno State. This, of course, is Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. So I want to talk to you about week 11 games and whatever else is on your mind. Alabama dominance. Who can beat the Tide? Who's your list? Is it nobody? Is your list in the NFL? Like a caller I took earlier today over at ST1 Sports on College Football Coast to Coast who said nobody can beat Alabama. I've got a list of NFL teams that Alabama can beat. So my questions for you tonight would be, who can beat Alabama? Not necessarily who's better than Alabama, because I would say, my opinion, is that Alabama is the best team in the country. And it would take a whole lot in the final few games of this season and into the postseason for me to have proven to me otherwise. But that doesn't mean that they can't be beaten on a particular night. So who can beat Bama? Upsets. We usually get 4 or 5 every week in the top 25. What are the upset possibilities tomorrow? Who do you think is going to get upset? My predictions will be coming out before noon Eastern time tomorrow. I keep pushing them back all the time. You guys that watch me on a regular basis know that. I think that's going to be my resolution for 2019, is going to be to get my predictions out on Wednesday or Thursday. But we will get our predictions out, as we always do, before the kickoff at noon Eastern time on Saturday. All right, Syracuse just drubbed Louisville 54-23. What does that mean? Well, Syracuse came into the weekend at number 13 in the college football rankings. They could conceivably have a top 10 matchup with Notre Dame next week. And even though Syracuse cannot win the Atlantic Division of the ACC unless Clemson loses to Boston College and they lose to Duke, and then Syracuse and Boston College would play for the ACC Atlantic Division Championship. And did I mention the phone lines are open? 860-325-3687. So this is Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line? I don't know if it takes our phone lines one phone call to get warmed up, but this seems to have happened about the last 5 shows where the first call doesn't connect. I do what the instructions say to do, and then the person always has to call me back. So I apologize for that. I have no idea what the problem is, but it's always the first phone call, and then the rest of them are fine. Hey, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who do we got on the line?
DeAndre, how you doing?
Hey, DeAndre, you are number 1 again.
Yeah, man. Look, you got such a great show. Sometimes I like to sit back and just listen. But I try to get in because I work my part-time late at night. Sometimes I try to get in and listen and get some conversation going. But Florida State, boy, I know I haven't mentioned them much this year, but their 35-year bowl streak is on the line. You think they can turn it around?
So they're sitting at they're sitting at 4-5.
Right.
They've got Notre Dame, so there's 4-6 most likely. I did shoot a prediction video on that over at SD1 Sports, so I'm not going to spoil that, but I've got a ton of notes here on Florida State. I actually went back and I watched the North Carolina State game last night, last week's Florida State North Carolina State game, until it got out of hand, until it was over. I watched the first 3 quarters, and I just made a list of miscues by Florida State. Just, oh my goodness. The first couple drives of the game, they blew coverages. They lost guys in the secondary. They got no pressure. This is the one surprising aspect of the game against North Carolina State to me, because I knew the offense was a mess. But to see them get gashed off tackle by North Carolina State repeatedly was surprising. And what else was surprising is that they couldn't get any heat on the quarterback, on Ryan Finley. That surprised me as well.
Right. Yeah, and shockingly, well, I think Wake is better than what they showed this year, but they beat NC State, which they always seem like they give the inner North Carolina schools trouble when they play them. But I was kind of shocked because I think North Carolina State was going for their third 10-win season ever in their school history, which is kind of shocking. But consider they have Phillip Rivers and Chuckabata probably had some pretty good teams. But I was kind of shocked to hear that they were going for their third 10-win season in their history. And I just don't see how they lost to Wake Forest like that. I knew it would probably be a shootout, but to lose to Wake Forest at home, and Wake Forest is a traveling team on the short week, that kind of shocked me, man. I was kind of disappointed that NC State did put on a better performance than what they did.
So I totally.
Wake Forest is also playing for bowl.
Yeah, so a lot of factors that you're hitting on there. So a lot of good points there would be a short week, a Thursday game instead of a Saturday game, and obviously the travel's not too taxing within the state of North Carolina, but still, you got to put the kids on a bus and haul them several hours, and you know you have 2 less days to prepare for an opponent. You had North Carolina State playing its final game at home. That was senior night, with Ryan Finley and company and all those seniors playing their last game at home. You would think that they would have been more motivated. And I'm not saying that there was a lack of effort because I didn't see it. I was at work. I wasn't able to like sit and just watch the game. But once I saw 23-20 with 5 minutes left, I made sure that I watched the last 5 minutes of the game and saw Wake Forest drive down the field and score the game-winning touchdown. But it was kind of curious before that. And I talked about this during the live stream last night, is that or no, this was on SD1 Sports this morning, that NC State had a decision to make. So they're driving down the field. There's about 2 minutes left. They're in Wake territory at about the 20 to 25-yard line. There's a 4th and 3. So they can kick the game-winning or kick the field goal that would put them up 6, or they could put the game on ice and convert the 4th and 3. They put the ball in Ryan Finley's hands. The Wake defensive back was right there, broke up the play. Good play by the Wake secondary. They turned it over to Wake, and they, of course, scored the game-winning touchdown.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know what to say about NC State sometimes, but they're one of those other programs, like Carolina. You know, everybody keeps saying, well, why you keep saying that? Because Carolina and NC State has so much money and they could spend. I think Carolina might have the biggest budget outside of maybe Florida State and all the ACC. But those two programs are very disappointing.
DeAndre, you mentioned North Carolina the other night. We had a conversation. You and I were kicking around some ACC schools, and you mentioned North Carolina underachieving. And I think people would be surprised to know, I ran the numbers on this. This was a couple of years ago, that between about over the last either 10 to 15 years, 2 of the top 10 NFL producing schools in terms of just sheer number of players in the NFL over the last, not currently in the NFL, but over the last like 15 years, 2 of the schools in the top 10 are Purdue and North Carolina. That might surprise some people.
Well, not really. I mean, you think of that to North Carolina history. Dre Bly, somebody that we don't talk about, who's a pretty good quarterback.
Sure.
Of course, Julius Peppers.
Yep.
I mean, I remember the year the first game of the year was against Clemson, and Dre Bly and Julius Peppers lit up Clemson. I think Ronald Curry. I heard somebody talk about anybody ever had a high school career like Ronald Curry did, and was as hyped as he was. And it's hard to find somebody that had a good high school in a high school year in a college career like that. I mean, a high school career in a basketball career, football and basketball career.
Sure.
And Ronald Curry was a beast. So that's why sometimes it just baffles me that Carolina has all that money and they don't do anything with it. And, you know, even if people say, well, they're a basketball school, it's Michael Jordan. I mean, the jump man is on everything. I mean, you got to attract them. And I know a lot of your kids might not know the Lawrence Taylor that me and you know. But I mean, I'm sure they have heard of Lawrence Taylor, and Julius Peppers is still playing.
Yeah.
I mean, they have had some nice teams. The year that I don't know, Julius Peppers was a freshman or sophomore, but I think they went to Oklahoma one year, and Bunning was the coach and beat them, and also I believe they beat Texas in the same year.
Yep.
And Carolina was pretty good. I just can't figure Carolina is stayed out.
And of course, they produced. I'm sorry, DeAndre. I just wanted to mention that, of course, they also produced one of your favorite quarterbacks, Mitchell Trubisky. I know you're always getting on here clarifying that the ACC championship game run was not under Mitchell Trubisky, but it was Marquise Williams.
Right. Yeah, and I don't. And even that team, I mean, it was what 10-3 or 8-4 or something like that. I mean, they didn't do anything in the ACC. I think they went down to Florida State, but then they lost to Duke in the same year. I think they lost to Duke.
Yeah.
State, both by 1 point.
Yeah, the Trubisky team only went 8-5. They lost to Stanford in the Sun Bowl, and they could have won the division, but they blew games down the stretch, and they lost to as we talked about a few weeks ago. They lost the key game to Virginia Tech in the rain, and only finished 8-5. And it was the Marquise Williams team the year before that won 10 games, and then they lost. They gave Clemson a pretty good game in the ACC championship game. It wasn't down to the last second, but it was a really good game. I think like 45-37. And then that team got completely rolled in their bowl game against Baylor.
Right. And if you go back and look at it, and I think that's what troubled Marquise Williams his whole career. They should have beat South Carolina, but he threw like 4 interceptions in the end zone. I think that was
opening night.
Last year.
That was a Thursday night game, opening night. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, they have the talent, but I mean, they have the capability of being better than what they are. Unfortunately, they're not. I mean, I don't know. It's because they share the area with 5 other non-bowl subdivision teams: East Carolina, Wake, Carolina State, and Duke. And then you also got Clemson in South Carolina, but I think North Carolina is the ninth biggest state in the union, and South Carolina is at the bottom, and the bottom 50, and so is Alabama in population. And look how good they are.
Yep.
In Auburn. I mean, but for some reason, North Carolina can't get it together. I can understand why Duke would be sorry or Wake Forest would be sorry, but North Carolina, NC State really doesn't have that excuse. East Carolina doesn't have that excuse, but East Carolina used to get a lot of players out of Florida and also more the Tidewater area of Virginia, which they don't do that well no more because of the emergence of Central Florida, South Florida. What's the guy that running back? Andre Johnson.
Sure.
He was out of East Carolina and played at was out of Orlando. So there was quite a few players. I think Jeff Blake. I don't think he was out of Florida, but I think he was out of Louisiana. But for some reason, those schools don't do good. So hopefully next year, Florida State and Miami will get it together to boost the ACC. Because so Carolina State too, because they got the capability. But I'll say this, so I won't leave you alone. But next year, and I know we shouldn't look for it like this, but I don't know what he's going to do with Clemson because I would look at this looking forward.
Yeah.
Because it's about to end. NC State loses all Ron Finley.
Sure.
Florida State, it ain't gonna be that good. I think Syracuse is gonna be all right because they got a quarterback that's backing them up.
DeVito.
DeVito. Clemson's gonna be loaded next year. Because all their skill players are coming back. I think all the person they lose on the offensive line is the guy that started the last 4 years, number 75. I can't think of his name, but they replaced him with the guy at Ohio State, Cameron Jordan, I believe. I mean, Clemson is just going to absolutely be rolling for the next couple of years. And I don't know what these other schools are going to do, but I hope they boost themselves up. I mean, Virginia's another school I don't understand why they're doing that bad. I think Virginia Tech's going to be back next year, too, because they'll get their quarterback back and some more of a good recruiting. I think they'll be back, but I just want to see the ACC be better. And, of course, Boston College probably pretty good because I think that Dylan is just a sophomore.
Yes.
So I think they'll be pretty good, too. So I know it's too early to look forward to next year, but, you know, the recruitment time is coming up. And I've been looking at 247 to see who's everybody getting. I thought Clemson got a player out of Miami that's a receiver. That's probably one of the best receivers in the country. And he's coming to Clemson. I'm like, damn, how did he get away from Miami or Florida State? And it's just amazing that they'll leg out some of the people that's coming to Clemson to play receiver. I just saw they signed 2 players out of California. And, one is supposed to be the top quarterback of the 2020 class or 2019 class. And I'm like, damn, why all these people coming down to Clemson now? And even back in the day when Danny Ford was cheating like crazy, he won't get people from California. They were coming from Tennessee, North Carolina, and South Carolina, and Florida, but not out there in California. This is simply amazing. So,
well, you guys are recruiting with Alabama and Ohio State now. You guys are a national program and a brand name, so it shouldn't be surprising, especially when a kid, like you mentioned, a 5-star from Florida, from Miami in particular, sees the mess that's at Miami right now, and the 2 other Florida schools aren't doing that well. I think the Gators will be fine with Dan Mullen, but who knows about Florida State when they're going to be good again. The last 2 things I'll leave you with, kind of connected to some of the conversations we've had recently, is the one school that impresses me. I was going to say amazes me. That would be a little overstated. Impresses me in the ACC in regards to recruiting and in turning average rosters into decent teams is Boston College. They really have little to work with in terms of numbers in the Northeast. They have like 5 to 8 really good players come out of Massachusetts and Connecticut every year. But besides that, they've got to go all over the place and try to find talent and develop kids. And then the other thing, DeAndre, we talk about the demise of Florida State, Miami, and we've had that conversation several times this year. Isn't it something else that when you talk about ACC pride and bolstering up the reputation of the conference, that it's going to come down to, looks like Syracuse and BC are going to be the 2 teams that are going to have to do that this year after Clemson.
Right. And I don't know. I mean, I still think if you take, well, I used to say NC State. I thought Ryan Friendly was a better quarterback than what he showed. I didn't really see a chance to watch all the Wake Forest game, but I thought he was a better quarterback. I know you shouldn't just always blame the quarterback for the loss, but you know, I thought Finley, I thought NC State this would be a whole lot better team than what they are. I think this was a 3rd loss.
Yes,
it was Syracuse, and lost Syracuse up at the Dome.
Yes,
I mean, we'll see. Let me ask you a question. One last question. What do you think about this? What did you think about Syracuse and Notre Dame in the next couple of weeks? Is the quarterback can't play Rooks?
What do I think about the game?
Yeah, do you think Syracuse will have a chance?
Absolutely, they've got a chance. Yes, they've got a chance. If Northwestern can hang with Notre Dame, and Ian Book, the Notre Dame quarterback, I don't know if you're aware, he's most likely not going to start tomorrow night against Florida State, but he's supposed to be back next week. But he's obviously, coming off a fairly serious injury that's forcing him out of a game. So, and that's game's going to be at a neutral site at Yankee Stadium. This Syracuse team, they're nobody's made them look bad. They beat North Carolina State. They took Clemson to the wire. They're playing well against everyone. I expect this to be inside of 10 points.
Hey, this is Terry Ann.
Hey, Terry Ann, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I just thought I'd call in to keep some of these other callers blocking.
Well, I greatly appreciate that. I hope you're not calling just for that, but I do appreciate you kind of blocking. Everybody's mentioning that we need to block all these people, and you're just kind of taking the lead and doing it all by yourself. So I appreciate that. Boy, I haven't run into this kind of luck. I guess it was going to happen at some point.
Yeah, I tell you. But I thought I'd call in and maybe talk about the Bama game tomorrow. I think it should be a pretty good game. You know, Mississippi State's defense is actually ranked higher than LSU's was, so I think it'll be a pretty good game.
Do you truly believe it's going to be a good game? And what's a good game to you? Well, what do you think when you're thinking this could be a pretty good challenge? This should be a decent game. What are you thinking about? How close?
Well, I don't like for it to get too close, because when it starts getting really close, I actually start having chest pains.
Oh boy, we don't need that. Terry Ann, it's a good thing you root for Alabama, because if you rooted for somebody else, those chest pains would be like every other week. You only have to deal with them like once a year.
Yeah.
Well, I hope the chest pains for your sake. Now, this is going to completely change my rooting interest from just wanting to see a good game to, well, I want Alabama to win this game like 50-0, because I don't want Terry Ann to be suffering chest pains.
When it gets real, if it ever gets real close, I just have to turn it off and then go back and watch it after I've seen the final score. But I haven't had to do that this year, because, you know, Tula's just put up such numbers. I've just never seen Alabama have offense like they've had this year, I'll tell you.
Well, first and foremost, I'm sure you had some chest pains with the Mississippi State game last year. I remember that one. That was a really good game.
I sure did.
That was a heck of a game. I was.
And then the Auburn game.
Sure.
Even though leading up to that Auburn game, the week of that Auburn game, I kept just having this god-awful feeling that Alabama was going to lose, because we had so many injuries at that point last year. I'm just hoping we can stay healthy and have some good games here on out. And how do you feel about Alabama, Mark? I mean, do you think that Georgia's going to be any competition in the SEC championship? I mean, I think that's probably going to be our toughest competition until we get to the playoffs.
Oh, absolutely. That's your toughest game. Now, had I not seen the Alabama that I saw last week that went to Death Valley and did what they did to LSU, I would think differently about this Georgia team, because we didn't know a whole lot about them. Of course, we know how talented the roster is, but they hadn't been challenged, hadn't played a good team until 2 weeks ago. And they really laid it on Florida in the fourth quarter. It was a really good game before that. And then they really took over the game in the fourth quarter. And pretty much Kentucky, they had their way pretty much from midway through the first quarter, and were the much better team. They are much more explosive and have more game-breaking type players than LSU does by far. That's the big threat that they pose to Alabama that LSU can't even come close to. The Elijah Holyfields, the DeAndre Swifts, the McCole Hardman, those type players that LSU does not have. So that would be the one big advantage for Georgia. That's going to be a different game for Alabama to have to deal with.
Right.
But Alabama's still much better.
Quarterback is better than LSU's quarterback was.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. And he had a little rough patch there in the middle of the season, but he's played much better the last few weeks. So if you get the Jake Fromm that we've seen the last couple of weeks and saw most of last year, that's going to make the right reads and decisions, and who has a potential NFL career, then it could be a game similar to what we saw last year in the national championship game. A really good game. But Georgia, man, they're going to have to be on their game, because otherwise, if both teams show up and play their A game, then Alabama still wins. It's a good game. It's an okay game, but it's still, 38-24.
Yeah. Okay, and so say Alabama does make the playoffs. Who do you think in the playoffs would give them the best competition? Because I'm thinking it's probably going to be Clemson.
Terry Ann, considering how dominant your team is, you are such a humble lady. It's very gracious to hear you state this in such terms that, if Alabama makes the playoffs, and that's I enjoy that. That's great.
Yeah.
You know, your team is just far and away, it's the best team in college football. But we know that things can happen on a particular game. So Clemson, I think, far and away would be the biggest challenger. Clemson's that team. And if there would be somehow a rematch, Georgia would be the second team that I would select. Michigan has an outstanding defense. Michigan is like a better LSU. They're going to play a very similar game to LSU offensively, but they have better wide receivers. They've got a better quarterback. He's more mobile. So they've got the potential, but they still haven't quite shown me enough that they would be able to hang with Alabama. But those would be the three teams. And I had a caller the other night who really likes Oklahoma. But, man, I just can't imagine that Oklahoma paper-thin defense just not allowing 60 points.
Maybe. Oklahoma just doesn't have the defense. That's why I went Clemson, because, you know, Clemson's defense is ranked right on up there. So and that's why I went to Clemson.
And we were talking about this. It must have been earlier today. All these conversations run together, but people were asking me the same question. And the one team that I threw out is a complete wild card. And I don't want people to get this wrong, that I'm not saying this team can compete with Alabama today with the way that they've played this season. But in terms of just sheer talent on the roster, this is the one team outside of Clemson that would be the biggest threat if they could somehow pull it together. And that's Ohio State. If you're just looking at talent on a roster, but they are clueless right now. They have so many problems and issues. Again, they're 8-1 just because they throw out talent on the field, but they're kind of a mess right now. So they're probably not going to make it.
Okay. And I just saw on the feed, Michael Hogue wanted me to tell you that he was talking about Pat Fitzgerald. When he called it.
Okay. Is he talking about Nick Fitzgerald or Pat Fitzgerald?
He said Pat Fitzgerald.
Okay, he's the coach at Northwestern. I didn't know if he was talking about him or he was talking about the Mississippi State quarterback.
Yeah, because he asked a question earlier on the chat about Northwestern. Did we think Northwestern was going to win this weekend? And did we think Purdue might come back and win the Big Ten?
Okay, so he is talking about Pat Fitzgerald. So I don't know what Pat Fitzgerald would be nervous about. He's been coaching at Northwestern for 15 years. He's played in a lot of big games. I don't know if his team might be nervous, but I'm not really concerned about Pat Fitzgerald being nervous. He's a quality coach, a very good coach who's built a nice program there at Northwestern. So I don't know what he's alluding to in particular. I would think more so Nick Fitzgerald would be nervous. I'm sorry, what's that?
Who does Northwestern play?
They're playing at Iowa. Tough place to play. Oh, okay. Good team, but nothing.
I think Iowa would probably win that. They've been pretty good this year, haven't they?
Who, Iowa?
Yeah.
They're losing a lot of close games.
State I'm thinking about.
Well, they're both about the same.
Okay.
Iowa beat Iowa State the second game of the season. Iowa's they're very comparable teams. They're both roughly, 20, 25 in the nation. They're decent teams. They're good teams, but not great. And Iowa's lost a lot of close games. Otherwise, they should be winning that division. But they lost the last 2 weeks, basically, in the last play of the game against Penn State.
And I've also been trying to keep up with Purdue because of that story that come out on game day about the kid, that has the cancer and everything. So I've been trying to keep up with them, too. They've won some pretty good games.
Yeah, Purdue's an odd team. Every time they play a ranked team, they beat them, and every time they play somebody else, they lose.
I know, it's kind of weird.
One of my best friends graduated from Purdue, and he texted me the other night after they beat who they beat last. They beat Iowa on the last play of the game, and he's like, "We've beaten every ranked team we've played this year." And I said, "Unfortunately, you can't beat anybody else. You've lost 4 games against unranked teams." So. Well, Terry Ann, I appreciate the phone call, and I want to make an apology to Michael because I was a bit leery because he's never called before, and I've never seen his name in the live chat that I didn't know necessarily what I was getting into with that phone call because I couldn't distinguish a voice there. So, and then when I couldn't understand him, I thought, uh-oh, here we go again. So,
yeah, I understand. I've enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks, Terry Ann.
Back another time.
I appreciate that. You have a great night. Oh, I believe I cut somebody off. Why, I don't know, because I just hit the screen so that I could hit the number 1. Here we go. It's a wild card as to what I'll get tonight. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line? Uh-oh. Hang on just a second. I lost my speaker. There we go.
I turned it up.
James, how you doing? No, that's not your fault. That was on my phone. The speaker shut off. How you doing tonight?
Doing all right. Got 2 questions.
All right, what you got?
First one, you've been talking about who do you think can beat Alabama. I know Clemson obviously is the number 2. Their history with Alabama for 3 years, but Michigan, as deep as they are up front, O-line, D-line, new O-line coach, weapons coming back, offense coming together. Do you think they have a shot to beat Bama?
Yeah, so we kind of ran this down with the last caller. Clemson's my first choice. Georgia's my second choice. And then Michigan would be my third choice because the corners lock down the wide receivers. Now, if they can lock down Alabama wide receivers, that's another question. Rashawn Gary in the middle, hopefully he would be healthy. Chase Winovich, just NFL players all over the place. Devin Bush, I love that kid. Khaleke Hudson, really good players all over the place. And again, the secondary play at Michigan is right there with anybody. They're strong on all 3 levels. As you know, the offensive line has improved remarkably. It would be interesting to see it against Alabama, but it's improved remarkably since early in the season when they played Notre Dame. I don't know that Karan Higdon's an explosive great back. He's a good back. I would like to see somebody else emerge, like Chris Evans was supposed to be a better player. And the Michigan wide receivers. The Michigan wide receivers are much better than LSU's, decidedly better. So they should be able to separate a little bit more than LSU. That was an issue that Joe Burrow had to face, was those receivers were covered. They were blanketed most of the time. Yeah, Michigan would be my third choice.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like, the 5-star talent on the outside. And I don't know. I'm just kind of, it's been a long time since Michigan's actually been up there, so it's kind of weird, 48.
So you're obviously a Michigan. You're obviously a Michigan fan. Yeah, we could talk about the Tate Forcier years and everybody else since 06 has pretty much been the downfall there. Ryan Mallett, of course, in 07, but relieving Chad Henne, if I recall. Yeah, so I would think as a Michigan fan, you've got to be one half of you has to be extremely confident because you keep taking on these teams that have been better than you in the Big Ten, the revenge tour here, and knocking them all out decidedly. They're by far playing much better football than anybody in the conference. And you would think that the Ohio State game is going to be another 2 or 3 touchdown win, but we know what the history is, and we know what the talent is on the roster, and so we'll just have to see it play out on the field.
And then the other question, tomorrow, obviously, Ohio State gets Michigan State in East Lansing. I'll be at the game.
Oh, nice.
Michigan State's getting healthy. Their best O-lineman will be back tomorrow. Will be in action. He's actually a buddy of mine, but yeah, what do you think their odds are for tomorrow?
Well,
they can pull it off.
They asked me to do some previews and predictions over at SD1 Sports, and I actually picked Michigan State to win 23-21. Yeah, so Ohio State's a better football team, but man, at least I know, like, I was watching Michigan State 4 to 6 weeks ago, and they started to look awful. I didn't know who I was watching, a team that was bringing back 20 or 21 starters from last year, and I didn't expect them to be a serious competitor in the Big Ten. I picked them to go 8-4, but they were looking awful for about 3 weeks. And now at least they have an identity. They have figured out, this is what we're going to do this year. This is who we're going to be. And Mark D'Antonio, to his credit, once again, it's almost as though he thrives on adversity. So take away his 3 or 4 best wide receivers and give him some more injuries elsewhere. Take out Lewerke, give him a bum shoulder, bring on Rocky Lombardi, and they go and win these games against Penn State and Purdue. And Ohio State's a not much more, but decidedly more talented. But I don't know that they're going to be able to block Michigan State and run the ball. Now, they showed glimpses of that last week for the first time in about 6 weeks against Nebraska last week, but they're facing a much different front with Michigan State. So, and not having a mobile quarterback, I think it's going to be difficult for the Buckeyes to score too much. They'll score on a few explosive plays, and that's why I'm throwing them 21 points. But it's going to be a struggle.
Definitely, and then I think Michigan State will have some success running the ball tomorrow.
Yep.
It's been iffy this year against the run, and Michigan State's getting some players. They struggled up front all year. They had 4 injuries, 5 injuries. I know 2 guys that I know were all conference last year, haven't played in about 5 weeks, so hopefully they get the job done tomorrow, and that means Michigan clinches, I think.
Yes.
So that's all I got, I guess. Good luck to Michigan and Michigan State, I guess. Weird saying that, but have a good night.
All right. Have a good one. I appreciate the phone call. So Ohio State, Michigan State's the best game at noon. I don't think it's even close. Although TCU at West Virginia, if the Horned Frogs show up, maybe they give West Virginia some issues on the road. I would love to see that game at TCU for possible upset implications. But my primary screen is going to be Ohio State, Michigan State, and then I'm going to go TCU in West Virginia. I'll be eyeing that. And just purely from a football standpoint, the game doesn't mean a whole lot right now. Although if Wisconsin needs a whole lot of help to win the Big Ten Western Division. Wisconsin at Penn State's a noon game, and that just basically shakes up the rankings a little bit. May change the bowl tiers and tie-ins for the Big Ten, but Wisconsin, Penn State, not as important as we might have expected at this point in the season. All right, we also have South Carolina at Florida. Keep your eye on that one at noon. Kansas and Kansas State. I only mention that because it's a rivalry game, and there is speculation that Kansas and Les Miles are in discussions. Wouldn't that be something? Vandy at Mizzou play at noon, and Ole Miss and Texas A&M as well on CBS at noon. Man, actually, got some options here of games that I don't have to see, but I certainly don't mind watching Ole Miss and Texas A&M and Penn State and Wisconsin play. But I think because of West Virginia being in the running, I've got to keep them on my radar with TCU in town, and then Ohio State, Michigan State are my 2 primary games. And if there's a third, I like Wisconsin and Penn State would be my next selection. Then again, the SEC has 3 decent games at noon: Florida, South Carolina, Mizzou, Vandy, and Texas A&M, Ole Miss. All right. Sorry, Navy Thomas at noon, Illinois at Nebraska. Can't find myself watching that one, or Maryland, Indiana. Duke and North Carolina play tomorrow. So we know our Duke guy. We've have 2 Duke callers now. So you guys are going to be locked into the North Carolina Duke game, of course, and it's not basketball season. All right. UCLA and Arizona State play at 2 Eastern time. Why? That's 11 a.m. on the West Coast. And I don't see a television network listed here. I don't know who's driving that decision. All right, 3:30 Eastern time. First and foremost, Mississippi State at Alabama. That will be front and center, my focus. My attention goes to Mississippi State, Alabama. And if it's 28-0 midway through the first half, then I deviate elsewhere. But until Mississippi State proves that they can't hang with Alabama, that's my focus. Also, Oklahoma State at Oklahoma, much like the TCU West Virginia game. I wish the game was in Stillwater. I would give the Cowboys a much better shot of pulling off an upset, but Oklahoma State. Washington State, call me crazy, upset alert. Washington State at Colorado, dicey. That's a potential upset. Kentucky at Tennessee. Northwestern at Iowa, 3:30. So that's my second game at 3:30. Mississippi State and Alabama. Boom, on the 50-inch second screen. I go with, Iowa Northwestern on Fox. All right. Elsewhere, 3:30. Actually, on ESPNU, this is a huge game. Huge game. ACC Coastal Division. Virginia Tech and Pitt. Enormous game. Pitt leads at 4-1. Virginia Tech's 4-2 in the conference. That's for first place. So then we get to the 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock hour. A lot of group of 5 games. Oregon, Utah could be entertaining, but for Utah, it means a lot. For Oregon, basically nothing. It's on the Pac-12 network anyway. Can't see it. All right, at 7 o'clock, Auburn, Georgia. Miami, Georgia Tech on ESPN2. The Auburn, Georgia games on ESPN at 7 o'clock. Those are definitely my 2 games for definitely Auburn, Georgia at 7 o'clock. Bam. Miami, Georgia Tech, whatever. Georgia, Auburn, front and center at 7 o'clock. Then at 7:30, I'm going to start to waver toward that Notre Dame, Florida State game. I'll be weighing Auburn, Georgia, Florida State, and Notre Dame. I usually strike up 3 screens. I get the 2 laptops and the 50-inch at 7:30, Texas and Texas Tech. All right, at 8 o'clock, this is another example of Alabama, Mississippi State. It's another version of that. Clemson at Boston College at 8 o'clock on ABC. I will lock into that game at kickoff and see how long BC can hang in the game. And once it gets to 17-0 or 21-3, okay, I'm going somewhere else, and I'll keep it on my radar, but I'll go somewhere else first and foremost. So BC and Clemson at 8 o'clock on ABC. These are all Eastern time. And then late night, just to watch some football, Cal at USC. USC can still win the Pac-12 South Division at 4-3. Cal at USC. I know for people that are hyper-focused, like most of you are, on the college football playoff, who cares about USC and Cal? But I love the conference races and the conference championship games. So USC and Cal is a big game at the Coliseum at 10:30 Eastern time, ESPN. And there's usually a slate of Pac-12 games, but that's really it that late at night. And then if you really want to dive into the group of 5, you've got San Diego State and UNLV at ESPN2 at 10:30, and Nevada and Colorado State ESPNU at 10:30. All right, that's my viewing day. The must-sees: Ohio State, Michigan State, Alabama, Mississippi State, Clemson, Boston College. And then there's a ton of games in between all those games that I would like to see. All right. No more phone calls tonight. I'm not distinguishing the 12-year-olds from the 15-year-olds from the 25-year-olds. I appreciate it. I am sorry if I did not take your phone call and you had a serious college football comment or question to make. We will be all over the place online tomorrow with instant analysis right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. I so much appreciate the support. You guys having my back in the live chat. Once we have issues like that, you guys are right there for me. I wish I could block those calls. We'll work on that in the future. It's number 137 on the list of to-do items for me and my platform here. We will see you guys. Enjoy the football on Saturday. We will be breaking in. I will try to give you notifications in advance. Maybe send something out at 3 o'clock that says at 3:30 we're going to do a recap on all the noon games and set you up for the 3:30 games or whatever it is. I'll get the notifications out right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We'll see you next time.